think.
All righty, ladies and gentlemen, everybody welcome back. I will call out a recess, Lee County Zoning Board of Appeals hearing on petition, sorry about that, 21P 1566. South Dixon Solar LLC's request for a special use permit to construct a solar energy system in South Dixon Township. In case you have lost your information and you are listening to us maybe on YouTube or maybe on the phone, but want to know the full Zoom meeting information, the ID is 915-3923-9154. The password for this has been and continues to be, the Zoom password, I'm sorry, is 209840. If you want to watch on YouTube but not participate, use your browser on your internet capable computer and go to www.youtube.com. Once you get there in the search bar, type Lee County IL, short for Illinois, Zoning Board, excuse me, of Appeals. No need to be concerned with upper or lowercase letters. Find the session date, which should pop down, which should be a pop-down menu, and click on it, and you should be viewing us momentarily. If you have any questions about all these things, that Ms. Duffy's technical assistance number is 815-973-3449. And to make a record of appearances, I note the presence of the chair of the ZBA, Mr. Forster, its vice chair, Mr. Burrow, Mr. Bothy's present, and so is Mr. Meyer. Zoning Officer Duffy is present. Renewable Energy Coordinator Alice Hinkle is present. Mr. Boonstra, the state's attorney, is present. Courtney Kennedy, attorney for the petitioner, is present. Our expert IT person, Jonathan, is present. So is our court reporter and himself. I have counted informally 15 bodies as interested in-person people in the court, in the old Lee County Courthouse third floor courtroom. Jonathan, can you tell me how many people are appear to be on Zoom? And Jonathan reports 8 on Zoom. Oh, 7. Nobody in the back room, former jury deliberation room, is that right? All right. Making the total attendance a big drop from its previous down to 33. Okay. When we last left off, Ms. Kennedy, you were producing evidence and you may continue. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. Under the governor's current executive order, all persons 2 years of age or older, except those who have a disability as defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act, are required to wear a face mask covering their nose and mouth when in an indoors public space such as this, regardless of whether they are maintaining a social distance of more than 6 feet or not. Thank you for your cooperation in that regard. At this point, if you are in this courtroom or, well, no, just in this courtroom, I ask you please to turn your cell phones off or at least to silent. Thank you. All right, sorry about that. You may proceed, Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Judge. I'd like to call Jennifer Klingshirn to the stand.
Sharon, would you step up and raise your right hand, please? Want to step up and raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Have a seat.
May I proceed, Judge?
You please may.
Could you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Yes, my name is Jennifer Klingshirn, Klingshirn.
And can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yes, my background and education are in environmental science. I'm also a certified wetland delineation specialist.
And how are you currently employed?
I am the senior project manager at Energy Renewal Partners. I am also an environmental scientist there, and I have worked with the company for over 7 years. I have been in the energy industry, though, for approximately 9 years, focusing in the last 7 to 8 specifically in renewable energy, in solar and wind development.
And as the senior project manager, what are your job responsibilities?
My primary responsibilities are permitting specialization. So I support solar and wind clients, in this case, a solar client, in identifying the local, federal, state requirements that would be necessary to develop a solar energy system in this case. I have 8 years of experience in consulting with federal agencies such as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, state agencies such as the IDNR, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, as well as local entities and other state and federal entities as well.
And are you familiar with the applicant or petitioner in this case, South Dixon Solar?
Yes, I am.
And how so?
Duke Energy retained our firm to identify federal, state, and local requirements that would be necessary to build and construct this solar farm. And in this case, we were retained to put together the special use application, consolidate the materials for the application, and to provide testimony here at this hearing.
So is it a fair statement that you're being paid to be here tonight?
That is correct. Our firm is at the forefront of renewable energy permitting specialties. And yes, Duke has retained our services to ensure that they are in conformance with local law.
And are you familiar with the proposed project area?
Yes.
And what, if anything, can you tell me about the character of the land within the project?
The project itself is primarily characterized as agricultural land, primarily row crop agriculture.
And what can you tell me about adjacent properties to the project?
For adjacent properties to the project, the land use is also primarily agriculture and primarily row crop.
Does the project require any new infrastructure from the county?
That is not anticipated at this time.
And what about public utility facilities? Will the project utilize any of those?
No.
Ms. Klingshirn, are you familiar with the original ordinance governing solar energy systems in Lee County?
Yes.
And are you aware that Lee County recently passed a new or revised ordinance in Lee County?
Yes, I am.
And if I refer to the most recent ordinance as the new ordinance, you'll understand that I'm referring to the newly passed ordinance in Lee County.
Yes.
And the same goes if I refer to an original ordinance, you'll understand that I'm referring to the first ordinance in Lee County governing solar energy systems.
Yes.
Are you familiar with the terms of the original ordinance?
Yes, I am.
And are you familiar with the terms of the new ordinance?
Yes.
Under the terms of the original ordinance, is the siting of a solar energy system allowed as a special use in agriculturally zoned land?
Yes, a solar energy system is allowed and permitted in the Ag 1 district, an agricultural district, as a special use.
Is the same true under the terms of the new ordinance?
Yes.
Are you familiar with what's known as the Lee County Comprehensive Plan?
Yes, I am.
And do you know roughly when the comprehensive plan was passed by Lee County?
Approximately 2009 or 2010.
And was the new, to the best of your knowledge, was the new ordinance passed after the Lee County Comprehensive Plan in Lee County was passed?
Yes, to the best of my knowledge, yes, it was.
Are you familiar with some of the goals of the comprehensive plan?
I am.
So one of the goals is to maintain the agricultural economy in the county by limiting non-agricultural development on prime farm ground. What, if anything, can you speak to this first goal with respect to the project?
With respect to the comprehensive plan and this goal, a solar energy system such as this is a temporary use of the land. The land now currently under agricultural row crop production is proposed in this case to temporarily be used for another form of production, that of sunlight into electricity. The land itself will be allowed to rest, essentially saving this area temporarily, shifting temporarily to another form of production, electrical production, as opposed to agricultural row crop production, but allowed to return to that agricultural row crop production should the owners of the property elect to return that property at that time. So yes, the SCS, the solar energy system, is a compatible agricultural use.
And is the project taking participating parcels out of agricultural production?
No, it is not. It is taking it, it is taking it out of agricultural row production, but overall the use is still an agricultural use in utilizing additional natural resources, in this case, the renewable resource of sunlight to produce electricity. And again, this use is compatible and is allowed and permitted under both the new and the original ordinance.
Are you familiar with what's known as the productivity index, or PI, of soils?
Yes, I am.
And can you tell us roughly what that is?
The PI is a productivity index, is a value that is assigned to a specific soil type. It is in a way, a measure of the soil's productivity. It takes into account crop yield and other factors, but ultimately it is a value defined as the productivity index. Soils with prime farmland soils are generally classified as Class A, Class B, and Class C soils. Class A soils generally have a PI value of 133 to 147. Class B have a value of 117 to 132, and Class C valued from 100 to 116.
And did you personally calculate the PI of the soils within this project area?
I utilized an online program called AgriData Incorporated, the Surety Pro, to determine this number.
And so how did you use that program? Did you input the project parcels, or walk us through that, please?
Yes, so the project area is input into, again, the AgriData Incorporated Surety Pro system. In that, a map and data are exported from that system. Each of the soil types that are identified within the project area have that assigned PI value. And based on the acreages of those soils within the project, a final weighted average productivity index was provided. And again, that is an export of the AgriData Incorporated system.
So using the AgriData Surety Pro, what was the PI of the soils within the project area?
The PI, as determined by the AgriData Surety Pro system, is 123.5.
And was that a weighted average?
That is correct. The weighted average, so the PI itself is a single number, and the weighted average is the average over the different soil types weighted, give it a certain weight based on that value.
And so is it a fair statement that according to the surety maps, the weighted PI of the project is within Class B?
Yes, at 123.5, the Class B soils are determined to be 117 to 132. So yes, Class B.
And to the best of your knowledge, did the Lee County Soil and Water Conservation District calculate the PI of the soil within the project?
Yes, they did.
And what was the PI according to the Soil and Water District?
The information received from the Soil Water Conservation District was that the weighted PI productivity index for the project area was 113.
And are you familiar with how they calculated that number?
The number is included as a result of the Natural Resources Inventory Report. That report was commissioned as required by both the original and new ordinance to be paid for by the applicant and to be included in the application. That was completed. The Soil Water Conservation District staff completed that Natural Resources Inventory Report, and that report did result in a weighted PI of 113. I do not have the original data to compare to. However, that was the information that we were provided.
So what class is the PI that Soil and Water calculated?
At 113, that is a Class C soil.
So taking into account the weighted PI that you calculated and the weighted PI that Soil and Water calculated, would the project be removing optimum soil out of agricultural production?
No, Class A soils were, the weighted PI did not indicate a average PI of Class A soils. Again, the weighted PI indicated Class B and Class C soils, although those are considered prime farmland, as is much of Lee County. They are not optimum Class A soils, although they are prime farmland soils.
The next goal of the comprehensive plan is to preserve and enhance the rural character of the county. What, if anything, can you speak to this goal with respect to the project?
Yes, again, the project is a temporary use of this land, thereby preserving and enhancing, as the comprehensive plan states, preserving and enhancing the health of the soils over the course of the temporary use. And speaking to the rural character, the use of the site as a solar energy system, in this case, conforms to the rural character of the land, as it is a quiet neighbor. It does not produce sound at night at all. Any sound that is produced is below the Illinois Pollution Control Board levels. Minimal lighting will be utilized for safety purposes, and the project itself does not generate odors or other off-property impacts.
The next goal is to preserve and enhance the farming lifestyle of the county. Will the project preserve and enhance the farming lifestyle in Lee County?
Yes, it allows families to keep farms within the family for future generations. And again, as a temporary use, the land can be returned at the end of the life of the project to future farming practices. It does provide an additional source of revenue for those farm families who have chosen and elected to enter into agreements with Duke Energy for a specific period of time to use their land for another form of production. And again, the project area, the properties within the project will be allowed to return to an agricultural row crop use, as is primarily the case at this point.
How will the project support the other goals of the comprehensive plan?
Yes, so in reviewing the comprehensive plan, the project is consistent with many other portions of the comprehensive plan. It will help to implement this plan by some examples: improving local air quality. Again, this is a renewable resource that does not produce air impacts and is an odorless use of the site. The project itself will be preserving and improving long-term productivity of soils. I'll go into this a little bit later, by planting native grasses and forbs and maintaining that throughout the life of the project in place for a short time in place of row crops. The project will also be promoting the county's sustainability goals. It will enhance and improve the local electric grid and utility infrastructure, as has been testified to beforehand. It will be creating good paying, locally based jobs where available, and it will also be increasing the property tax base.
And I believe you testified earlier that you helped compile the application materials for this project. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I'm going to hold up to you this, what I call an application binder. It's a white 3-ring binder. Are you familiar with this?
Yes.
And it's titled Special Use Permit Application submitted by South Dixon Solar LLC for the South Dixon Solar Project. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And what is this?
This is the application materials that were put together that go with the special use petition.
And did you prepare the application binder in preparation for the Zoning Board of Appeals hearing process?
Yes, I did. I compiled and consolidated and organized the materials into this application for special use and provided the hard copy binders to the Lee County Zoning Administrator.
Judge, I'd like to mark this petitioner's exhibit 4.
Well, no, you can mark it, but would be marked 5.
Okay.
I lost count. No, that's right.
Have you previously identified wildlife, environmental, soils, vegetative, and wetland issues for other solar energy projects?
Yes, I have. I have been in my current position. I have evaluated pre-development, development phase operations and construction for over 200 solar projects, many of which have been in the state of Illinois. Approximately 10 of those solar projects we have evaluated are in the permitting process or have gone through the permitting process. We have evaluated further projects here in the state of Illinois. However, it was determined earlier on in the process than this that those projects would not not be viable for specific reasons. One of the other things that our firm assists developers in is identifying early on characteristics of a site from a natural resource perspective, from a wildlife and wetland perspective, floodplains, which sites, although have specific characteristics that would be good for a solar project, have characteristics that would not make them or it would not make them a viable project, whether it be there would be impacts to species, impacts to the floodplain necessary. So again, this project has been vetted, has gone through that process, and we're at this point because of the constraints that we have evaluated at this point and believe it is a viable project.
And are you familiar with the wildlife and environmental studies prepared for the South Dixon Solar Project?
Yes, I am.
And I believe you have a PowerPoint presentation for tonight. Is that right?
I do.
You pull it up on the screen, please. Which I'd mark this as an exhibit. Would that be number 4 then?
Yes,
Thank you.
because I already marked that when I got handed to it. Handed to me.
And Ms. Klingshirn, did you personally prepare this PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, I did.
And did you prepare it in anticipation of tonight's hearing?
Yes.
Please proceed.
Could you please go to slide 2? So this slide runs through, again, a little bit of the support that we have given to this project, again, reiterating that this project is at the point that it is at because it has been evaluated for specific site constraints, that this project is moving forward into the permitting, the zoning and then permitting process as a viable project. In that, several studies have been completed to evaluate, in my expertise, wetlands, wildlife, and cultural resources, soils, and those will be what I will be going through in this presentation. So if you could please go to slide 3.
And what wetland studies have been prepared to date?
To date, a preliminary wetland and habitat evaluation report was prepared specifically for the project. The results of that study have been incorporated into the site plans, which have been testified earlier in this process. And the results of the wetland evaluation were taken into account when Kimley Horn's engineers were preparing the site layout. Further study will likely be required further down in the permitting process. If permits would be required for minimal impacts to stream crossings for roads, that was determined later down the line, then those permits would need to be obtained, and federal law with regard to the Clean Water Act would need to be adhered to and will be adhered to.
What wildlife studies have been prepared to date for this project?
The preliminary wetland and habitat evaluation report, again, was completed here at the early outset of the project. The habitat and species that were evaluated are twofold at the federal and at the state level. At the federal level, the evaluation determined, again, that further study would be required. Further studies are anticipated moving into 2022, again, with a longer lead time, development time for these projects. These studies are done at the appropriate time of development. So following the zoning process, moving into the more targeted permitting process, additional studies will be required and they will be completed per federal and state regulation.
We move to the next slide real quick, please. Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. Moving into the consultation part of the wildlife studies. So consultation with U.S. Fish and Wildlife at the federal level is ongoing, and the project will be designed so that no federally protected species will be negatively impacted.
Did the applicant initiate a consultation with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources for any endangered species and wetlands?
Yes, as required by both the original and new ordinance, the applicant completed consultation with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources through the Ecological Compliance Assessment Tool.
Is that known as the EcoCat?
Yes, the EcoCat. If you could please move to slide 5.
And could you tell us generally what the EcoCat is?
Yes, so the EcoCat is an online process by which any development project and other projects as well, if there's a trigger, would be required to initiate consultation with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. That is completed through this EcoCat online tool. The applicant is required to provide specific site information, location of the project, anticipated actions, site disturbance to be taken, what components are anticipated to be put onto the site. The system and the IDNR take everything into account and they provide back a consultation response.
And what was that response?
The response was that no further consultation was necessary and that consultation per state statute was terminated.
And so just to make it clear, the IDNR found no expected impact on threatened or endangered species. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And is that why it was terminated?
That's
Consultation was terminated, I'm sorry.
Yes, it was determined that there would not be an anticipated impact to state protected species and additional resources as well. The EcoCat does take into account additional natural resources and items in their database and in their state surveys. And again, yes, they determined there would be no negative impact and they determined that consultation with them was terminated at this time.
Was there a preliminary cultural resource study performed for the project?
Yes, there was. Please go to the next slide.
And are you familiar with that study?
Yes, I am.
Can you tell us a little bit about the study and its results?
Yes, so this is a preliminary cultural resource study that was commissioned by Duke Energy, the results of which indicated that further study would be recommended should certain actions be taken. Beyond this zoning process, the project is required to adhere to state and federal law, both the Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, as well as the Illinois Historic Preservation Act for specific state actions, thereby requiring the project to adhere to additional federal and state laws with regard to potential impacts to cultural or archaeological resources and provides for mitigation and avoidance measures, which would be adhered to.
And did you perform a natural resources information screening for this project?
The screening was provided and was performed by the Lee County Soil and Water Conservation District staff.
And to the best of your knowledge, was a report generated?
Yes, a natural resources inventory report was provided to the applicant and was provided to Lee County staff and is included in the application as Appendix D.
Do you know roughly how large that report is?
I believe Ms. Staffy before this meeting said it was about 1,400 pages. So that document was provided electronically based on feedback from staff, and therefore it's not in the binders. However, it is available electronically.
Thank you. Can you describe that screening and tell us who did it specifically?
Yes, so the Lee County Soil Water Conservation District staff completed that report. Per the original ordinance and the new ordinance, that is a requirement that Duke commission that study and present that study before the ZBA.
Are you familiar with the Lee County Solar Ordinances requirements with respect to weed and grass control and the vegetation plan?
Yes, I am.
Can you tell us a little bit about that plan?
Yes, if you could go to the next slide. Great, thank you. Yes, so the weed grass control landscape plan, these are portions of the both, again, the original ordinance and the new ordinance to be provided with the application. The weed grass control and landscape plan that Duke Energy has put together is included as Appendix L of the application. That weed and grass control and landscape plan goes through the fact that the project will be implementing and will be planting a native grass cover across the project that will be maintained throughout the life of the project and remain in place. It also provides for invasive species control, as well as stipulations for including pollinator habitat, grasses and forbs, flowers, within that native grass cover on the site, thereby providing habitat for pollinator species such as butterflies, bees, etc.
Are you familiar with what's known as the Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement, or what's referred to as the AMA?
Yes.
And what is it?
The AMA has been talked about in this testimony previously with regard to drain tile requirements, survey mapping, et cetera. As Mr. Huddleston testified to, it also has decommissioning requirements as testified by Duke personnel previously as well, but it also stipulates for several other environmental factors such as topsoil and maintaining topsoil in place, not removing topsoil from the site. Again, the AMA itself was put together and is implemented by the Illinois Department of Agriculture. And it was put together with farmers in mind and with input from many different stakeholders. And one of those stakeholders being developers in this case. So the intent of the AMA, and I believe the goal of the AMA as well from all these different stakeholders, is to put together a binding agreement document. In this case, a fully executed version has been provided by Duke in its application. And the intent of the AMA itself is to preserve and in some likelihood restore the integrity of the agricultural land that was for some time removed from row crop production and placed into another type of production.
Will the project be required to prepare a stormwater pollution prevention plan?
Yes, it will.
And is this plan required by any agency?
Yes, this plan is required as part of a permit that is required by the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. The stormwater pollution prevention plan will have to be created as part of that state permit. The state permit is required for the disturbance for development that disturbs over 1 acre of land or more. So prior to construction, the Duke will be required to commission a professional engineer to create this stormwater pollution prevention plan that takes into account all aspects of the project, location of the project, the grade of the project, the exact locations, the final design of the project, and determine that and prove that and ensure that Duke will be required to comply with certain erosion control and stormwater measures to ensure that erosion does not, leave this site. It has specific stormwater erosion sediment control measures in place. Again, this is completed by a professional engineer and is required at the state level.
Was it a fair statement that this stormwater pollution prevention plan is aimed at controlling sediment and erosion pollution while also maintaining a stabilized site during construction?
Yes, that's correct.
Does this plan need to be approved by any entity?
Yes, it is approved by the IEPA, the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency.
And must it be approved prior to construction of the project?
Yes, it must be approved prior to any disturbance of the ground for construction activities.
Judge, I have nothing further.
Okay. How about you, Mrs. Duffy? Any questions, this witness? Renewable Energy Coordinator Henkel? Mr. Boonstra? Okay, turning the ZBA. Mr. Forster, any questions of this witness?
No
I'm
questions.
sorry. Mr. Forster, any questions of this witness? No? Mr. Burrow?
No questions.
Mr. Bothy?
No questions.
And how about you, Mr. Meyer?
No questions.
Okay. Forgot who I started with last. I think I started with people in the room. So addressing Zoomers, if you have a question of Ms. Klingsharn, now is the time. If you do have a question, please, if you're video conferencing, down at the bottom of the screen where the tab says participants, click on that. We should have, well, don't interrupt, please. If I forgot what I said, the tab which says participants, if you'll click on that, then down should pop a list with some options. One of them is raise hand. If you have a question, do those, hit participants and click raise hand, and hopefully we'll see it. All right, I'm told there was a question. I can't see it. Jim, I think it says Jim's iPhone. Don't know who you are, so why don't you pop on and then start with telling us your name and where you live, work, or own a business in relation to the proposed project.
Yes, I'm Jim Turtelot. I am a joining landowner surrounded on 3 sides by the project.
Okay, go ahead, ask a question.
Are there any Class A soils in the proposed scope?
There are Class A soils within the project area. Again, the weighted PI takes average PI as an average and is weighted.
How many acres of Class A soils are in the project scope?
I would have to do some calculations, but so I can't answer that right now.
How many acres of Class B are in the project scope?
I have the document with me. I don't have the numbers added up, so we can provide that at a later date, but I can't answer that question.
And the same question would be for Class C, but don't you think those are important numbers to share?
Those numbers are at my disposal, and I'm happy to do those calculations. I have not done them in preparation for this hearing. It was not in question.
Okay, that's the only questions I had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other Zoomers with questions? Raise your hand. I'll give you a few seconds to figure out the technology. I don't see any. I've got my neck craned pretty well. Did anybody see any? Okay. Moving from the Zoomers to in person, I see Mr. Lawson's hand raised first. Mr. Boonstra, do you mind turning the light back on, please?
Jamie Lawson, adjacent landowner. Is this the same presentation? Is this the exact same presentation that you gave last time, except for a few minor alterations, additions, or subtractions?
The presentation was updated based on what has changed with the studies that have been completed on the site and the status of those studies.
So not much has changed.
It was
based on-
updated for this presentation, but yes, it is a similar presentation.
Has the land changed since your last presentation? The PI of the land?
The PI index provided by the Soil Water Conservation District in December was updated internally by their staff. That update was provided to Ms. Duffy. The PI itself for this hearing, I ran through the Agridata Incorporated Surety Pro system. Again, as specified, these are the numbers that are produced by 2 well-informed either products or personnel, and that's
Okay, thank you. And what was the cutoff for A soils, score-wise?
the cutoff for A soils. I believe, one second, apologies. The cutoff for A soils is 133.
How did you, on your last presentation, come up with the weighted average productivity index for this area is 137, and this presentation is omitted?
So it was changed based on updated information that we got. So initially that 137 number, again, that's run by the Soil Water Conservation District staff. That was the
Would you
number.
slow down, please?
That was the number provided by staff with the Soil Water Conservation District. Again, there were some questions on the number that was.
Whoop. You're doing it. It's hard for the court reporter to keep up with you.
Apologies.
It's okay.
So the number itself was revisited as there were questions as to her methodologies. That was updated and provided at the time to be a number of 113. So what was entered in previously as 137 was the information that we had at the time from county staff.
Approximately how long ago in months would you say that this number was achieved or derived to from you, or arrived, or whatever the proper term is? The 137, how long? 6 months?
The original NRI report produced by county staff was provided to us in December of 2020.
And the original one was 137, which would fall under A soils.
Yes, falls within the range of the Class A soils.
Thank you. Are you being paid by Duke Energy to be here?
Yes, as testified, our firm is at the forefront of permitting and environmental compliance, and they have paid us to be here to ensure they are complying with, at this point, the special use process.
Thank you. Are you familiar with Lee County's Title 10 zoning regulations, 10-1-4 rules of definitions, which reads agriculture, agricultural use, land or buildings and machinery, the principle of which includes one or more of the following: the commercial production of farm products, feeding, breeding, and management of livestock or poultry, including exotic and farm animals, dairying, fur, bees, and fish farming, accessory uses of customarily incidental to agricultural activities, including but not limited to farm residences, growing, developing, processing, conditioning, or selling of hybrid seed corn, seed beans, seed ores, or seed oats, or other farm seeds. Agriculture does not include the extraction of sand, gravel, or limestone, even when such extraction is related to an agricultural activity. Were you familiar with that definition from Lee County?
Yes.
Does the Lee County rules and definitions of agriculture just read include industrial solar power plants?
No, but
Thank you.
by special use, the solar energy system is an allowed use in an agricultural district.
I have two pictures here. Could you, I want her to see, and I don't know if she can see them from here. Could you take those up to her, or maybe hold them in front of the camera so the Zoomers could see them as well?
Only if you got,
It's a question. In your professional
supposed to have
opinion,
8 copies of something you would submit as an exhibit. I announced that at the beginning. Can you make copies of that? Unless it's already in evidence. I just looked over Dee's shoulder and I see it's,
I don't believe it's included in any other evidence, Your Honor.
okay. We'll take a break while make
Okay, thank you.
5 minutes or 10 of. Take a break. All right, back on the record. Ms. Klingshard, do you have in front of you what has been marked IPA and IPB?
I do not.
Okay. You may inquire, Mr. Lawson.
Your Honor, I have to apologize. I was not here. I came in late the first night, so I wasn't aware of the copying procedure. In your professional opinion, could you tell me which picture more accurately depicts the 3,838 acre solar South Dixon Solar LLC project once built? Picture A as provided by Duke Energy or picture B as provided by me?
Apologies.
He's not referring to A and B, he's referring to IPA and
I'm sorry.
IPB. Is that correct, Mr. Lawson?
That's correct. IPA or IPB.
Oh, I thought you had it in front of you.
No, apologies. I was just handed the document. Could you repeat your question? I'm sorry.
In your professional opinion, could you please tell me which picture more accurately depicts the 3,838 acre solar South Dixon Solar LLC project once built? Picture IPA provided by Duke Energy or picture IPB provided by myself?
IPA as provided by Duke Energy. Additionally, photos looking very similar to, if not from the same project of IPA, were included in Patrick Smith's testimony. IPA depicts the project will look like. The project will be solar panels throughout approximately 1/3 of the leased area, while the remaining 2/3 will be maintained native grassland.
So does the photo provided by Duke Energy show the 3,838 acres that will be total property involved in the project? Or does it merely show a ground view of a few solar panels?
It shows the ground view as would be typical of those within closer vicinity to the project, as opposed to an aerial view, which again was a conceptual, preliminary site plan showing an aerial view of where those panels will be located is included in the site plan. However, this view is what would be more typically seen by passerbys, although not exactly.
In your professional opinion, could you tell me which picture most accurately depicts the 3,838 acres of solar that was provided?
I don't know how many acres IPB depicts, so I couldn't say.
Which picture is closer to 3,838 acres? Picture IPA or picture IPB?
I don't know the acreage depicted in IPB. I don't know the height or scale, so I can't give an accurate answer.
Have you ever set foot on this project site?
I have.
Thank you. Are you aware that when Duke Energy Renewables paid for expert witness Tom Huddleston was asked by Duke Energy Renewables attorney to describe the current state of proposed properties, that he stated it was prime farmland consisting of row crops and corn and beans?
Yes, I'm aware that was his testimony.
So if in further questioning from me refers to prime farmland, you will know that I am referring to the 3,838 acre proposed for the industrial solar power plant known as South Dixon Solar.
The acreage of the project is 88% farmland by the Natural Resource Conservation Service.
What is the total acreage of the project?
3,838 acres.
Thank you. Are you aware that all Duke Energy Renewables paid for expert witnesses are the same as the first petition for South Dixon Solar?
I believe additional Duke staff provided with expert witness testimony, but the remainder of witnesses are the same for this project.
Thank you. In your professional opinion, would you say that all provided slideshows are basically the same as the first petition for South Dixon Solar, with the exception of some very minor additions or subtractions?
Judge, I'm going to make an objection. She can't speak to other presentations prepared by other people or expert witnesses.
You can rephrase the question, Mr. Lawson, in terms of of the ones you have seen?
Have you participated in these complete hearings for this round of petitions?
Yes, I have.
Have you seen all of the presentations that were presented by the expert paid for witnesses?
I have.
Would, in your professional opinion, are they very similar to the ones that were provided last petition, which you also participated in?
Any updates would have been made would be pertinent to the updated petition and the updated application.
In your professional opinion, would you say the only significant changes from the first petition and second petition is that Duke Energy Renewables hired the Lee County Board Chairman's daughter, Courtney Kennedy, to represent them? The Duke Energy Renewable is offering residents $2,000 per year through the Good Neighbor Program not to oppose the project, and the addition of the Lee County Tax Assessor's testimony.
I am aware that there have been changes in council. I am aware that the ordinance has been updated. However, I am aware of what's gone into the application, and the application is complete.
You? Would it be a fair statement to say that when the paid for expert witnesses were asked questions by Duke Energy Renewables attorneys, they were able to answer all the questions? However, the paid expert witnesses were not able to answer all the questions asked by interested parties.
Sorry, what was the question?
Were all questions answered that were asked of the witnesses by interested parties?
Expert witnesses answered questions to the best of their ability by the public.
With a simple yes or no answer, were all questions answered that were asked of expert witnesses by interested parties?
I can't speak to what other expert witnesses may have not answered
I didn't
sufficiently
ask you
in
if
the
you could
eyes
speak
of the
to
public.
what they answered. I just asked how they answered, if they answered yes or no.
I believe there are other details that could have been provided. However,
I'm not asking about details. I'm just asking for a yes or no. Were they able to answer all questions, or a yes or a no?
no.
Thank you. Are you aware that when asked questions by Duke Energy Renewable slideshow presentation, paid for expert witness Patrick Smith stated that the Duke Energy Renewable slideshow presentation was outdated and not accurate?
I'm aware of his testimony and that there is no specific components that have been chosen for the project. Again, they will be at a specific tier of either inverters or panels, but that at this time it's unknown what will be put into the project, and therefore there are multiple different panel types, inverters that could be shown.
Again, I am not asking for components. I'm just asking if you were aware that Patrick Smith stated that Duke Energy Renewables presentation was outdated and not accurate.
I'm aware.
Thank you. Are you aware that paid for expert witness Mike Morose was investigated by the Lee County Sheriff's Office?
I'm not aware.
Are you aware that Mike Morose provided the property value impact analysis for Shady Oaks 2 wind farm located in Lee County in June of 2020? And when asked by me during the first petition and while under oath, if he had ever performed a property value study for any wind farms in Lee County, he said no.
That's not my area of expertise, so I can't speak to the details of his report.
Are you aware that the details of his report are public knowledge and are available online?
Yes.
Thank you. Are you also aware that Mike Morose, with all of his years of expertise and history of at least once not telling the truth while under oath, only provided us with 3 matched pairs, and that the 6 houses that he included in his presentation titled residential sales nearest to South Dixon Solar were sold well before the first petition for South Dixon Solar was ever filed?
Again, he's the expert witness. I am not, and his report is much longer than what was included in his testimony as I put.
I'm
that
just,
report
all I'm
into the
referring to is the
application.
report that we were presented.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Are you aware, with all the years of expertise and history of at least once not telling the truth while under oath and only providing us with 3 matched pairs, and that with the 6 houses that he included in his presentation titled Residential Sales Nearest to South Dixon Solar were sold well before the first petition for South Dixon Solar was filed?
I'm not aware.
Would it not be a more accurate statement with that those 6 houses should have been stated residential sales nearest to prime farmland and prime farmland in Lee County rather than South Dixon Solar, as it did not exist at the time?
It was not my expert witness testimony. I can't answer that question.
Thank you. Are you aware that Duke Energy Renewables, Inc. has a less than favorable credit report from Dun and Bradstreet Corporation? According to Dun and Bradstreet, Duke Energy Renewables, Inc. has payment behavior concerns, as well as a very high tendency for severely delinquent payments.
I'm not aware. We've worked with Duke Energy for over 10 years on successful projects. That's the extent of my awareness.
Are you aware that Duke Energy Renewables, Inc. stated during testimony for their first petition that all interested parties had been notified by certified mail, and that in reality, all interested parties were not notified, and the ones that were notified were not notified by certified mail?
I'm aware.
Would you personally enter into a 40-year agreement with a company that provides a presentation that is not accurate and is outdated, has a history with Lee County of not sticking with a project for its lifespan, has lied at least twice under oath, allows a person who has lied at least once while under oath, and has been investigated by the Lee County Sheriffs for comments made while under oath, be an expert witness?
I'm sorry, but that's argumentative and it's not relevant what she would.
Your Honor, I'm simply asking her
I'm
opinion.
not allowing the question.
Thank you. I wouldn't either. Does the current character and aesthetics of the prime farmland contain massive amounts of PVC modules?
It does not.
Does the current character and aesthetics of the prime farmland contain massive amounts of polymers?
It does not.
Does the current character and aesthetics of the prime farmland contain massive amounts of aluminum?
It does not.
Does the current character and aesthetics of the prime farmland contain massive amounts of copper?
No.
Does the current character and aesthetics of the prime farmland contain silver?
No.
Does the current character and aesthetics of the prime farmland contain lead?
No.
Does the current character and aesthetics of the prime farmland have an electromagnetic field across all 3,838 acres?
No.
Does the current
Or
character and
the in place other components that presumably create EMF, such as transmission lines.
I'm aware of it. My question would be, does
I didn't ask you if you're aware. You don't add things, just ask your questions.
the current character and aesthetics of the prime farmland have an electromagnetic field across all 3,838 acres?
I can't answer that question.
Thank you. Does the current character and aesthetics of prime farmland contain massive amounts of dual pane tempered glass?
No.
Does the current character and aesthetics of the prime farmland contain an 8-foot high wire fence?
No.
Did you see any 8-foot high wire fences while visiting the project?
Not in my assessment, no.
Thank you. If this project did not exist and the prime farmland would continue to be used today, would the current character and aesthetics of the prime farmland require an international feasibility study,
Not to my knowledge.
a preliminary wetland delineation and habitat evaluation,
That would be required, yes.
okay, and Illinois Department of Natural Resources ecological compliance assessment test?
That's been completed for the project.
I'm asking if the project did not exist and it just remained farmland as it is today, would any of these be required?
I can't answer that question. There are a lot of different triggers that would require the IDNR to assess a project area.
Would it require a natural resource information NRI and a land evaluation site assessment, Lisa? To
Ag-
remain farm ground?
Again, there are other triggers that would require that by Lee County.
An agricultural impact mitigation agreement?
The agreement itself is specific to solar development, so no,
Would not.
no.
A drain tile survey?
Yes, I believe throughout the routine life of the project as agricultural land, a drain tile, specific drain tile studies would need to be required. In this case, it is going to be required and will be completed over the project area,
Thank you. A driveway access permit?
depending on the needs of the property.
A well and septic permit?
I can answer that question.
A floodplain development permit?
The project will not be developing solar panels in the floodplain, therefore the floodplain development permit will not be required at this time. I can't speak to what other development would be proposed to be developed in the floodplain.
Thank you. Downcast lighting?
The downcast lighting and any lighting requirements are to the ordinance specifications and the Lee County ordinance, so I can't speak to other uses or proposed uses of the project.
Thank you. Did you view any downcast lighting when you visited the site?
I did not personally know.
Thank you. A site plan design?
Again, dependent on the proposed, any future proposed development for any of these properties.
To clarify, I'm only asking if this is to remain farm ground as it is today. If there was no changes, my question would be, would we be here or would it require any of these? No change, no development was made onto the property. It would remain row crop of corn and beans.
With no development, no permits would be required.
Thank you. Decommissioning?
No, that's specific to a solar energy facility.
A noise study?
There are state requirements to maintain the Illinois Pollution Control Board levels. Again, many forms of sources of noise would need to comply with that.
A glint study?
I'm sorry.
A glint study? Is a glint study required to farm the property as it currently is?
It is not.
Is a glare study required to farm the property as it currently is?
It is not.
A drainage study to farm the property currently or to remain farming the property?
No.
A vegetation study? If you remain farming the project, would it require a vegetation study?
Could you define vegetation study?
I cannot, I just pulled this out of the reports that it was titled. Underneath the inaccurate and outdated reports is where I pulled it from. So no, I cannot. A wildlife study?
I can't speak to that, potentially.
An environmental study?
Environmental study is very general. I can't answer that question.
Too far, okay. A soil study?
I believe there would be instances where agricultural land would want to assess the soils on the property. So yes,
There would be instances, but not at all points as required for us, as there is for a solar farm.
with no development, there would not be a trigger to, but I can't say what a private property owner would elect to study on their property.
Thank you. Again, I'm not asking if what one would elect to do. I'm asking if one is required.
It would not be required to be
That's not a
submitted.
question. Don't tell her what you're asking. Ask a question,
Okay.
please.
Would an environmental study be required to continue to farm the project?
Environmental study is too vague. I can't answer that question.
Your Honor, I started out with, I did specifically say if this project did not exist and the prime farmland would continue to be used today, would the current character and aesthetics of the prime farmland require?
That was a long time ago. You can ask the question.
Okay. If the project was to remain in farmland, would it require a health study?
I can't speak to that.
If the project was to remain in farmland, would it require a safety study?
I can't speak to that.
If the property were to remain in farmland, it would require property value impact analysis.
I can't speak to what the private property owner would pay to assess
Okay.
for their property.
If the project were to remain farmland, would the huge 4-inch white binder that Courtney Kennedy displayed be needed?
Again, I can't speak to
Okay.
other petitions, other
Thank you.
forms, other permits necessary.
Would there be other permits necessary that would require a 4-inch white binder to continue to farm the land as it currently sits?
I can't speak to that.
Thank you. Are you aware that this project contains evergreen shrubs as a visual buffer?
I'm aware.
Would there be a need for this visual buffer if the current character and aesthetics of the land were not changed by this project?
The vegetation buffer was not a part of the original ordinance. It was elected to be completed by the applicant. Since the installation of the new ordinance, it is a requirement. And that is it's something that Duke will be adhering to.
I'll ask a question again. Would there be a need for this visual buffer if the current character and aesthetics of the land were not changed by this project?
I can't speak to other developments within the county that may or may not require vegetation buffer based on visualness from an adjoining property.
So you stated that the visual buffers are required under the ordinance.
Yes,
What are they buffering? What is the purpose of the visual buffers?
they are buffering within proximity to adjacent non-participating residences.
But what are they buffering?
They are providing a visual buffer for those property owners.
A visual buffer because the aesthetics of the visual property has changed?
The aesthetics are a part of what the new ordinance was taking into account with feedback from adjacent landowners. And it is very typical for most, if not all, solar development that I have worked on. So it made sense to include it in the new ordinance.
So do you typically try to hide, would it be a fair statement to ask if the visual buffer is hiding something?
I don't think that's a fair characterization.
Would you need to put a visual buffer up for something that is attractive to look at?
I think that the visual buffer is in place for several reasons, not simply aesthetic.
Is a visual buffer required by this ordinance?
It is required by the new ordinance.
Is a visual buffer required to farm the project?
It is not required to farm the project.
Thank you. Are you aware that a Lee County board member will be paid around $18,892,400 by Duke Energy Renewables if the project is built?
I'm not aware of the exact terms of the agreement. However, I am aware that of the landowners that have elected to sign agreements to enter their private property into an agreement with Duke to build the solar energy facility for the life of the project.
Thank you. Are you aware that that very same board member has made a comment during a public meeting that he wasn't here to provide rest or comfort to a neighbor? He was a business and he needs to be able to make a profit.
Again, private property owners have elected to join this project. I don't have any other information besides that.
Thank you. Are you aware that if this project is built, that some Lee County zoning board and Lee County board members will be paid $766,410 per year, which is 64 to 68% of what the entire county of Lee will be paid in taxes per year?
I can't speak to those numbers, but there are other private property owners within the project as well that have elected to join the project.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last statement?
That there are dozens of property owners that have elected to sign agreements to enter into this special use permit, into the solar energy system properties for the project.
Of those dozens that have signed an agreement, are they being paid? Or do they volunteer their land?
They entered into agreements and are being paid for their land, yes.
Thank you. Are you aware that Duke Energy Renewables hired the Lee County Board Chairman's daughter, Courtney Kennedy?
I don't work for Duke Energy. I'm not a part of those decisions.
Do you know that Courtney Kennedy is Lee County Board Chairman's daughter?
I'm aware.
Thank you. Are you aware that Chris Hinkle, the father of Lee County Renewables Coordinator Alice Hinkle, is being paid by Duke Energy Renewables?
Again, I'm not aware to the specifics of agreements that Duke has made with the professionals and counsel that they have retained for
Are
this
you
project.
aware that Alice Hinkle is Chris Hinkle's daughter?
I am aware.
Thank you. Are you aware that Duke Energy Renewables is offering surrounding landowners $2,000 a year if they don't oppose this project through a good neighbor program?
Yes, I'm aware of the participation agreements that Duke has offered to neighboring landowners to enter into, again, a participation agreement with the project, yes, to receive a certain amount of money over the life of the project.
If they so choose to sign that agreement, are they bound by a confidentiality agreement and not allowed to are they not allowed to oppose a project if the money is taken?
I don't know the specifics of the agreement, but again, they're being paid to be good neighbors, participants in the project. Therefore, my opinion is they would not elect to speak ill of the project or come forth against the project.
Thank you. Are you familiar with the term Fortune 500 company?
Yes,
Are you familiar with the term stacking the deck?
yes,
Are you familiar with the term conflict of interest?
yes,
Are you familiar with the term possible ethics violations?
yes.
Thank you. That's all, Your Honor.
Other folks in the Zoom, or I'm sorry, not the Zoom room, the in-person room. Okay. Ms. Lawson?
Jennifer Lawson, adjacent to the project. First of all, I have one environmentalist to another. I appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
So in your professional opinion, you had said that this was temporary use of the land. So you can classify 40 years as temporary use?
Yes, over the course of, it isn't a seasonal change, it is a yearly change. And again, yes, I would classify 40 or even 80 years as a temporary use of a site.
You had said that this was a quiet neighbor.
Yes,
Are you aware Jason Cooper stated that the inverters themselves were set at 79 decibels?
I would have to refer back to his expert witness testimony.
Do you consider 79 decibels as quiet?
Again, that's not my area of expertise. The Illinois Pollution Control Board has standards by which the sound itself cannot go across into a neighboring property. So therefore, the inverters themselves at the decibel level that they are set to a specific setback from the property and modeled that way to ensure those Pollution Control Board levels are met.
Thank you. So you stated that this land would still be, it's a special use permit for agricultural. So as an SES, it's still classified as agricultural. The IEMA says that the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Control Plan requires an NPDES, which is specifically for industrial discharge. Why would agricultural require an industrial discharge permit?
It's the federal EPA regulations. The state mirrors those for different types of development. So the IEPA has in place, and all states have in place, a construction general permit for specific types of development. In this case, the project would be in compliance with that construction general permit. And again, that's very typical across the 40-ish states that I have worked in.
You had stated that previously and on this occasion that the IDNR had, I want to find the right terminology. They had terminated the consultation.
Yes.
In your professional opinion, do you feel that the 55 threatened and endangered species within Lee County is a fair assessment for them to terminate the consultation?
The IDNR produces its termination of consultation based on numerous factors and again, specifics that they are told that are going to be in place for the project and the location of the project, et cetera. That is sort of step one. There are state regulations that go a step further than that. So although the IDNR has come up with a termination of consultations, they see no issue. The project itself would also still have to adhere no matter what to state regulation with regard to take of state listed species. So there is state regulation in place that the project could not take, so kill, harm, harass, et cetera, a state listed species or else risk violating state law. So that those additional state laws would still need to be adhered to for the species that are within Lee County.
So Patrick Smith on 10/12/2021 stated the fiber cable will be used for communication and monitoring of the panels would be a buried cable. Do you think there's an environmental impact?
I do not in my expert opinion.
On 10/12/2021, I personally asked Patrick Smith, and now I'm asking you, would you say there's at least 14 different sections of industrial solar panels, which I mean non-continuing sections? There's either a road or a creek.
I have not counted them, but that sounds accurate. Sounds accurate.
Patrick Smith stated that they would bore under the roads and creeks or move the road. What environmental impacts would boring will have to either the local flora, wildlife, or tributaries?
The permits themselves for these impacts, these proposed impacts, are going to be evaluated at a later date in the permitting process. So beyond the zoning process, dependent upon where the project will ultimately cross a creek, need to cross, those permits would be required either from U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, state and local road permits, et cetera. There are dozens of stipulations with regard to protected wildlife and protected waters, cultural resources that go along with those permits. So although we're talking preliminarily at this point, there are extensive state and federal guidelines and regulations and requirements that will need to be evaluated dependent upon the impact or the location of the crossing, et cetera, all these different components that are still going to need to go into the permitting process.
So it is possible that this project could be discontinued because of the historical, agricultural, and wildlife protection agencies.
No, any of the actions that they would take would fall within a permit. It would just be which permit they would need to adhere to at this point. So no, I don't believe there is at this point any item that would not allow the project to move forward.
Are you aware this project is proposed? Are you aware where this project is proposed?
Yes,
Are you aware that this is actually located in the historic Galena Trail corridor, specifically what was known as the 1830 and Kellogg Trail?
I'm aware.
Are you aware of Section 106 of the State Agency Historic Restorations Preservation Act?
Yes, I am.
What impact does that have on this project?
So at the stage of the project, the Galena Trail itself would not require any consultation with either the SHPO office or the State Historic Preservation Office at the federal level or the Illinois equivalent at this time. Again, further studies will need to be completed depending on certain activities, and there are certain state actions that the project will likely trigger. And if they trigger those things, as the stormwater permit for one, there are certain stipulations, again, or it's kind of a web of who reviews what, but the SHPO office, that State Historic Preservation Office, would need to sign off on any of those actions as kind of an oversight on that too. So it is not anticipated to impact the project.
Are you aware of the Emmanuel Cemetery, also known as Heckman Cemetery, located at 1428 Pump Factory Road?
Yes, generally.
Are you aware of the Human Skeletal Remains Act Protection Act that protects human remains that are over 100 years old?
Yes, I do.
So you're aware that, for example, one of the graves there is from 1851.
I'm not aware of the specific dates of that cemetery.
How will this project impact that cemetery?
The project itself is not anticipated, or it's not going to be impacting the cemetery itself. Again, there are state regulations that protect for the unanticipated discovery of human remains. So again, that's very common, and there is a state equivalent of that law throughout every state. So if and that provides for if a body is found, if bones are found, if there is evidence of a burial found, there are other state regulations that require stop work, informed local law enforcement, et cetera. And there are steps forward. And again, it is a stop work policy required by the state before any additional action or any additional earth removal could happen in that area.
Courtney already asked my comprehensive plan questions. In your expert opinion, does 3,833 acres of black glass steel structure, woven wire fences preserve and enhance the aesthetic quality of the county?
As the project itself is a temporary use by industry standards, it's typically, it is always determined to be a temporary use, then yes, I do believe it is preserving and enhancing the agricultural land for future generations.
Are you aware during multiple testimonies during this trial that it has been said that this project will allow the land to rest?
I'm aware.
Are you aware that typically that is 1 to 5 years, not 40?
Rest is relative.
Okay, sorry. What effects would an earthquake have on an industrial solar plant?
I could not speak to the specifics of that, except for that there are, there's an emergency action plan in place that Duke has built, constructed, and is operating projects that are in areas that are earthquake prone or tornado prone, and that there's not anticipated to be any impact should there be damage to the panels. And again, there's a remote operations for these panels. Again, Duke and any developer wouldn't want the panels to be down as much as the public wouldn't want there to be damaged panels in the area. Therefore, the remote system lets them know specific circuits that are inoperable for them to go out and immediately fix the problem, should there be one.
Are you aware in the September of 1999, there was a 3.5 magnitude earthquake centered near Dixon?
I'm not aware.
Are you aware that in October of 2019, IEMA and FEMA made the estimate that there's a 40% chance for a major earthquake in Illinois?
I'm not aware of these specific locations of and expected magnitudes of earthquakes across the United States.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other folks with questions in the room? Yes, the lady in red. There's a movie about that lady in red. Where? Oh, different lady in red, but that's okay. We'll take all ladies in red.
Martha Johansson. I live within between a half mile and mile of the border of the site. As shown on your slide 6, was this archaeological survey completed yet?
Could you clarify the phase 1 archaeological study? That's referred to on the slide?
Yes, it says, this archaeological survey is expected to be completed. Has that been completed yet?
No, I'll elaborate a little bit more. No, it has not. So far, a preliminary study has been completed, but again, there will be state and potentially federal triggers beyond, at the permitting process that will likely require that phase 1 archaeological study.
The CPI can it change yearly?
Would you elaborate CPI?
The CPI that you've said is 133 this year and was 137 last year. Does this change yearly?
I am not aware. I do not produce the number. That is produced by county staff, county soil and water conservation district staff. And again, the number that I determined was produced by a third-party AgriData Surety Pro process. So I cannot answer your question.
Can an adult deer jump over the surrounding fence?
Not in my not anything that I've seen. Again, anything is possible. However, the fencing is put in place to secure the project, but also understanding that this may waylay certain larger mammals. Based on the site plan, the 3-mile branch and 5-mile branch that go either through the project or in close proximity, those will not be fenced off. So those thoroughfares, those natural thoroughfares will remain in place, and those larger mammal species and smaller species as well will be able to travel east-west, generally east-west through this region, through the vicinity. So it would not be, in my opinion, impeding any large mammal movement.
How often will mowing occur on this site if it is installed?
There's the plan in place to put together puts forth a routine maintenance, and again, staff will be on site in a routine manner for general maintenance. Anyway, I can't answer the question on how often, the timing of the year, et cetera. I would need to know to answer that question thoroughly.
Approximately how tall will the grass grow before it is mowed?
So it'll be maintained. Again, it's the plant mix that's chosen, the grass mix, the forb mix is chosen specifically. It's based on local input as well as Illinois. The exact the exact source, but it is in the wheatgrass control plan, and it will account for a specific chosen mix, keeping in mind the height of the forbs and grasses that would be kind of the maximum that would be ideal for the site. So it's chosen.
Who will do the annual inspection of this site?
The annual vegetation wheatgrass control inspections.
How will the weeds be controlled?
The weeds will be controlled. There's methods for spot mowing, for spot treatment, and it will be kind of a case by case seasonal basis, but it is evaluated multiple times through a season. I imagine staff are on site for other routine maintenance items, and that is something that's on a routine checklist for construction, for operations that I'm aware of on other projects, including other projects in construction that we're working on for Duke Energy.
How much topsoil will be moved?
No topsoil will be removed from the site. It will be placed, remain in place to the greatest extent practicable, and all of the topsoil stipulations and conditions of the AMA will be adhered to as Duke has executed that agreement with the state.
Will topsoil be removed from the property, even though it is stockpiled somewhere?
No, the stipulations of the AMA are that topsoil remain in place, again, to the greatest extent practicable. The flat nature of the site indicates to us that minimal grading would need to be anticipated anyway, and therefore minimal movement of any topsoil is anticipated. But no, it would not be moved from properties.
How will the organic matter be stripped and separated from the subsoil?
That would be completed in accordance with the AMA conditions.
Since no decommissioning has occurred in the United States, how can Duke Energy assure that the productivity of the land will be as good at the end of 40 or 80 years as it is now?
We can compare it to other types of development and what we know about the components going onto the project. It's been testified previously, that the AMA and county decommissioning processes will need to be followed. Therefore, the AMA has put forth by multiple farming and agricultural entities, this process by which there will be, the goal is that there will not be an impact to the agricultural land. So in my expert opinion, we can compare other types of development and other types of impact and temporary impact to this type of development.
How did you say that this will be, this proposed site would enhance life in the county?
The project itself will generate, as previously testified to, a large property tax. It will also enhance, again, resting the soils on the property to then return to the agricultural use. So I see a benefit for the agricultural families. It will bring, again, additional monies into the community. And that's what I can speak to from my expert opinion.
How many inches of topsoil are there on this proposed site?
I don't have that number in front of me. And it would depend on the soil.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other folks in the room, the other lady in red.
Christy Reese, adjacent landowner.
Go ahead.
Do you know whether the fence that they're going to erect is 6 feet or 8 feet tall?
I believe that it was testified that it would be an 8-foot tall woven wire fence.
Do you agree that there are a lot of wildlife that rely on this 3,800 acres of land for food and shelter, and they're not just protected species?
I agree. There are other species that are within Lee County. The change in land use and the change from a crop cover, which is yearly, seasonally disturbed and removed and replanted, will be, in fact, replaced by a maintained grass and forb cover, which will still provide habitat for those species.
But how will they get inside the fence?
They find a way. Again, the fence is a security measure. Small mammals will find their way in, as I'm sure everybody is aware of. But usually they can find their way out. And the components of the projects themselves are not a detriment and would not be harmful to those species, even if they were a bird to land on the solar panel.
In many areas, will the fences be erected along both sides of a roadway?
I believe there are instances, yes, where there are properties on both sides of a road that have entered into the project, and therefore a fence would be along both sides of a right-of-way.
So do you anticipate that the displaced wildlife will start to look for food and shelter within the city of Dixon and surrounding subdivisions?
No, I don't think that's a characterization, an accurate characterization. The species themselves will find comparable habitat, food sources, again, along 3 Mile Creek or 3 Mile Branch, 5 Mile Branch, but also just generally within the vicinity. said 3,800 acres. Species are transient, moving through constantly. Duke is maintaining these highways, if you will, of better suited habitat and movement throughout the vicinity, such as the creeks themselves, which again will not be fenced. The fence will be along the panels themselves, or right along the rights of way.
So when the animals are moving, as you said, along the highway that's erected by the two fences along our roadways, you don't anticipate hazards for vehicles or many vehicle wildlife accidents?
I have no data to support either way. I don't think it's a fair characterization to say there's not currently impacts that these species have along road rights of way. So I can't speak to if any changes would be seen.
Are you familiar with the practice of growing vegetables under the solar panels?
I'm familiar that is, it's not a common practice, but it is, I believe it's called agri-solar voltaics, and it's a kind of a newer idea that developers are looking into to kind of have a beyond sort of a dual trio use of the site to include that. So I am aware, yes.
Has Duke Energy promoted this practice on any of their other projects?
Not that I'm aware of. Again, it's a pretty new idea. It's the industry's kind of taking a look at it from the stance of, is it a good economic decision on top of just planting native grasses and forbs along with that? But so I'm not aware if they've assessed that, but not to my knowledge for this project.
Do you feel they may implement that on this 3,800 acres?
No, there are requirements to plant native grasses and forbs. So it would not be something that this would be implemented for this project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other folks in the room? Okay, you may step down.
Thank you, Judge.
Well, the last break we took was quick, so let's take another one, 5 of. And Ms. Duffy, you'll be next in the box. ready. Young lady, you want to raise your right hand for me, please? You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, would you state your name,
Dee
please?
Duffy.
What's your business or occupation, Ms. Duffy?
I'm the zoning administrator for Lee County.
And among your duties as zoning administrator, do you receive and catalog in any correspondence relating to particular petitions for whatever zoning classification change, special use?
Yeah, as part of my duties to receive and maintain documents sent to the zoning office for any particular zoning board matter.
With regard to South Dixon Solar's LLC's petition pending 21P 1566, have you received any such communications?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Have you, how many?
I would like to submit to the board 2 letters of support for the project.
And have you marked them?
I have ZO number 1 and ZO number 2.
Okay. And do you have copies for the assembled? Okay.
Everyone should have copies.
And these were received in the ordinary course of your business?
Yes, they were.
Okay. Any other big exhibits you want admitted?
I'd like to also present to the board the certified mailing receipts that were received by the petitioner and ordered as ZO number 3.
Okay, and that's a compendium of them all?
Yes, it is.
All right, ZO3. And does the board have copies of that?
No, they do not, but
Okay.
they can come to my office anytime to view them.
Okay. Is this mark? There it is. Okay, never mind. Anything else?
I would also like to submit the Lee County Soil and Water Conservation District Natural Resource Report.
And that consists of what?
That consists of, it's a rather lengthy report of approximately 1,400 pages. I did not make copies of this report, but it is.
Nor do you have it in front of you, right?
It's over there by my
All right.
desk.
And you marked that what, ZO?
ZO number 4.
Okay.
And that can be viewed at my office and on the website.
And how did you come into possession of that particular thing?
That was emailed to me by the Soil and Water Conservation District office.
Good. All right, anything else?
I
you
have
wanna-
nothing else.
All right, cross-examination of Ms. Duffy first, Ms. Kennedy,
Nothing, Judge.
Mr. Boonstra, Renewable Energy Coordinator Hinkle, ZBA members, Mr. Forster,
No question.
Mr. Burrow,
No question.
Mr. Bothy,
No question.
Mr. Meyer.
No questions.
Assembled folks in the courtroom in person. Question, Mr. Lawson. Mister, I saw your hand first. I gotta be, otherwise I'll lose track if I don't start.
Are you aware that of the many realtors that I contacted through multiple states, that none have had potential homeowners looking to buy a house that was surrounded by a 3,838 acre house?
No, I'm not.
That would not surprise you?
I'm not aware.
Or you're not aware? Would that surprise you?
No,
Why would that not surprise you?
that I'm not aware of what you asked. I'm sorry.
No, why would it not surprise you that no one's looking to buy a house near a 3,838 acre solar farm?
I'm sorry, I was just answering the first question.
Okay.
I didn't get that second
Right.
one.
How many letters of support were from participating landowners this time?
There was none.
None from participating landowners. Thank you. How many letters of support were there for the first petition?
I can't recall.
Would it be a fair statement to say there was more than 2 letters of support last time as opposed?
I can't recall.
You have access to that information?
Yes, I do.
Would you be
In
able
my
to,
office.
would you be able to reference that?
It would take some time.
So you are not able to answer my question in regards to how many
I can't
letters
re-
of
I
support
can't
there were
recall.
the first petition.
I can't recall.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Ms. Lawson.
Jennifer Lawson. How are letters for support or unsupported presented and received?
I received these 2 by email.
How is the public notified to be able to submit these?
I believe there's something on my website that states you can submit letters.
What is the purpose of the Lee County Soil and Water Natural Resource Report?
I can't answer that.
It's not a requirement of this project.
It is a requirement.
It is a requirement. Does it support this project?
I don't think it's a report that should be showing either way, if it supports or not. It's just,
But can you provide me a summary of what this report entails?
I-
What is the purpose of this report?
there's many aspects to it. I can't.
I had another question. I lost it. Thank you.
Yep. Any other folks in the room? Seeing none, I'll turn to Zoomers. Oh, I'm sorry. Lady in the red.
Christy Reese, adjacent landowner. Were you aware that there are 187 acres advertised for sale that are adjacent to the southern boundary of the Lee County Industrial Park?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Are you aware that since Duke Energy came into our community, they signed a lease with the landowners, and at this time, the landowners are not taking any offers on their land.
Can you say that again?
Since Duke Energy came into the community with this proposed solar project, they approached the landowner to sign a lease. So the landowners are not taking offers on the sale of the property any longer or at this time.
I'm not
That's
aware
not
of
a
that.
question.
Oh, it's not. Oh, I tried to. I asked her, okay, if she was aware first. If she,
You did not say, it, you just told her something, but
okay,
if you say, are you aware of the fact that?
okay. And are you aware that this particular piece of property could have been annexed into the city of Dixon for future property and real estate and sales taxes?
I wasn't aware of that, no.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other folks in the room? Sorry, I missed hand before. All right, turning to the Zoomers. If any Zoomers have a question, hit participants, raise hand, or if you're teleconferencing, asterisk and *9. I'll wait a few seconds here. Jonathan, if you see somebody's hand pop up, let me know. Wait some time, a little time. Okay, seeing none, you may step down. Yes, that's right. You may step down. Those witnesses having been concluded, I'm going to admit previously from tonight into evidence petitioners number 4, petitioners number 5, interested parties A, interested parties B, zoning number 1, zoning number 2, zoning number 3, and zoning number 4. All right, some housekeeping for just a minute before we run out of time. Board members, I'm going to work on some available dates here in a moment. So if you'll put on your calendar heads. I'm informed by the zoning office that now November 1st and November 4th are no longer available. I think, at least that's what Kelly tells me. She remembers my memory better than I remember my memory, but she tells me that's where I ended. So available so far in the future, foreseeable future, we have October 27th and November 3rd. I want to grab onto a couple more. So Tuesday, November 9th, Mr. Forster.
I'm okay.
Mr. Bothy. Mr. Burrow.
Yes.
Mr. Hughes is not here. Mr. Meyer.
What day?
Tuesday, November 9th.
Available.
Ms. Duffy. Ms. Henkel. Mr. Boonstra. Ms. Kennedy.
Yes.
Oh, Kelly. I'm sorry, say. Jonathan, somebody from your department. And I am. Okay. 2 more and then I'm going to shut up. I'm sorry. Tuesday, November 16th, a week from that day. Tuesday, November 16th. Mr. Forster.
Yes.
Mr. Burrow.
Yes.
Mr. Bothy. Mr. Hughes is not here. Mr. Meyer.
Yes.
Ms. Duffy. Ms. Henkel. Mr. Boonstra. Ms. Kennedy.
Yes.
Kelly. Jonathan, somebody from your department, and I am. All right, one more. Wednesday, November 17th, the very next day after the last one. Mr. Burrow. Mr. Forster.
Yes.
Mr. Bothy. Mr. Hughes, we don't know. Mr. Meyer.
Yes.
Ms. Duffy. Ms. Henkel. Mr. Boonstra. Ms. Kennedy.
Yes.
Kelly. Jonathan, somebody from your department. and me. Okay. So that makes in the future available dates, October 27th, November 3rd, November 9th, November 16th, and November 17th. All right. That having been said, I'm sorry, but we've had enough tonight. I don't think it's a good idea to start interested parties testimony at this point, so I'll recess until November 27th. This time I'll try and get it right. October, see? October 27th, Wednesday. That's about 8 days from now. Here, Old Lee County Courthouse, 3rd floor, 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, October 27th. Everybody have a good one in the next 8 days.
Judge, will be working on interested parties next.
Interested parties who want to testify, correct? Not make public comments, but testify. I think that's the next thing on the process. Okay.